Hey, readers, welcome to a very special remote edition of the Read It Forward Book Club. We, like you, are sheltering in place in our homes, but we're so excited, thanks to the wonders of technology, to be able to still have book club and talk about our March pick, which, of course, is Dear Edward by Ann Napolitano. But before we jump in, I just want to check in on my girls. How are you guys doing? Where are you? I feel like we're spread out all over the country. Actually, we're still all in one state, but it's a
But
big
it does
state.
feel like we're spread out a lot further than we are.
How are you guys holding up?
I'm doing okay. I was on a family vacation when everything started to get shut down, so I am staying with my parents upstate right now. Um, they have a home filled with beautiful artwork, but somehow I managed to find the only wall in the house that's like blank and antiseptic. But it's close to the modem, so needs must.
Exactly.
And I'm fine too. I'm also at my parents' house. It's currently for sale, which is maybe TMI. So I'm on the floor of my childhood bedroom, and this is my favorite color. So this is what my walls were painted growing up. But I'm fine. I'm just hanging in there. I think like everyone else.
Well, I'm here in Brooklyn in my apartment. I took this opportunity to put on a leopard print dress because why not? And I'm here in front of one of a few of my bookshelves. But yeah, I'm
Abby, I
so
love your
glad.
apartment.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I
it's
miss
so
it. I
nice.
miss you and I miss all those little books.
I know. I miss you too.
I
Both of
think you need
you.
more books, Abby. You definitely need more books.
Well, I don't know if anyone else is experiencing this, but I'm finding it hard to read these days.
I have been
Yeah.
doing that as well. Although I will say I finally made a breakthrough yesterday. I'm reading The Glass Hotel by Emily St. John Mandel, and finally I like cranked through 75 pages of it yesterday. So I think it's just a matter of finding the right books for right now.
Yeah, I need to find that book that gets me out of this dry spell that I'm having. So maybe I'll also pick up The Glass Hotel because that's something I packed before I left the office.
I'm so jealous.
I know packing those quarantine reads was a tough challenge, honestly.
Yeah,
I
seriously.
I flew to visit my parents and I was only supposed to be gone for a little over a week. So I packed 8 books and it's not enough. Luckily, my mom is a real book lover, so there are plenty of books in the house that I haven't read. But typical me, I was halfway through like half a dozen books when I left on vacation, and they're just sitting in my apartment in Brooklyn.
Ugh,
Oh
that
no.
that's where being a reader of multiple books will get you in trouble.
Yeah, it bit me in the butt. Also, I don't have my beloved Brooklyn mug, so I'm using my mom's Brooklyn mug. It's a
There
different
you go.
Brooklyn, but it reminds me of home.
Well, let's dive into talking about this book. I have my galley copy here. I do. A real physical copy.
I'm
And
currently using my copy as a stand for my laptop, so I can't pull it out.
It's helpful. That's good. So I will say first that I was nervous about reading this book because I initially didn't want to be sad. But I feel like in a lot of ways this book feels redemptive. And did you feel like you were stuck in the sadness of the plot, or were there moments when you felt uplifted by the book?
well, first, before we dive in, I mean, I assume everyone who's watching this has read it, but just for those who maybe don't,
Yeah, give us a recap.
Dear, yeah, Dear Edward is about a 12-year-old boy named Edward who is the sole survivor of a major plane crash. And it cuts back and forth in time between um, Eddie, or Edward as he comes to be known after the crash, kind of dealing with his trauma and growing up. It's over the intervening 6 years. I think it ends when he is 18 because they've just graduated from high school. And then also it alternates with passengers on the flight with Eddie who didn't survive. Um, and so it's really intense. And to answer your question, Abby, I was really nervous about it. Um, Aside from everything that's happening right now in the world, I would never really choose to read um, a book about a disaster of this nature or a sole survivor. It's not what I gravitate toward. But the people had spoken, so. And I had never read anything by Ann Napolitano before. Her writing is so beautiful. And even though the subject matter is really difficult, I found this to be a very easy book to read.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would have to agree. I think that just how beautiful the writing was really made up for how sad it made me feel. Yeah, I don't know. I also wouldn't have picked up this book at this time if it wasn't our book club pick. But I'm really glad that I read it because it is a beautiful book, and I do understand where all the buzz has come from because it's a great story, and I do recommend it to other people now.
Yeah, so I read this great Q&A with Ann Napolitano, and she talks a little bit about the research that she did going into this book. First of all, it took her 8 years to write.
Yeah, I
Um,
saw that. It's crazy. It's so deeply researched.
it really is. And she talks about spending just the first year doing exclusively research and taking notes. And, she says she herself is a nervous flyer and so never thought that she would write about a plane crash, but she wanted to learn enough to really portray it with specificity and accuracy, which comes through, I think, in the writing. Um, yeah, so she interviewed a pilot and, talked to the TSA and read all sorts of articles and other memoirs. And then, for the characters, the soldier in the play, she interviewed, in the book, she interviewed a soldier. She, when she was writing about Florida, who has believes she's lived a bunch of lives. She
I love
read
Florida.
Me too.
Neil Gaiman's The Sandman series. So I think, did you get a sense of that research as you were writing, just sort of imbued in her words?
I think so for sure. There was just a level of verisimilitude to it. Although I'm going to say something controversial.
I would expect nothing less. Please go.
Um, Despite how perfectly rendered and detail rich it is, I personally would have enjoyed this book more if we didn't learn anything about the actual plane crash. I just found it
Yeah.
so stressful, and
Yeah.
maybe this is just a lack of imagination on my part, but I also didn't really feel that I needed answers. Of course, the characters do need answers, so it makes sense within the plot. But for me, I loved reading about and thinking about the inner lives of all these people who were on their way to Los Angeles. And I knew that they were never going to make it there, but I don't know if I personally needed to experience everybody dying.
Yeah, I actually would agree with that. So I think the center of the story for me was more the people and not the plane crash. So I was definitely more involved and invested in learning their backstories than knowing about the crash.
And in the beginning, I thought we were going to skip the plane crash entirely. You sort of open and he's in the hospital, and you can almost put two and two together, but it does go back. So I was sort of, like, to use the double entendre of bracing for impact. I was, yeah. Maybe we won't say that, but
No,
it was
just like very.
yeah, it was hard to read in parts.
Although, like, to kind of reverse myself or make the opposite argument, I wonder I wonder if it hadn't been part of the book, would that feel kind of like a cop out, since we're eliding this integral and really traumatic experience that drives Edward's whole life and ethos and personality. So I don't know. Maybe I'm just complaining that it made me anxious while I was reading it. But, a plane crash would make me anxious.
Totally, and I think it's to be reading it, especially in this time, right, when a pandemic is sweeping the globe. I don't think, at least in our country, we have experienced anything to this magnitude traumatically as a country, as a people, since September 11th. And so this felt very much like almost pressing a bruise of, our country is in turmoil, and it reminds me of the last time we were here, because that dealt with aviation especially. So I think that, maybe if I was reading it in another time, it would have been, I would have had a different experience. But of course, that's the great thing with books is, I may read this again in 20 years and have a totally different viewpoint on it.
And I think
sorry,
you go, Jess.
Okay. I think I will reread this one. I think this is one that I want to revisit, maybe when times aren't so bad.
I was going to say the same thing. I think this is a book that holds up to multiple readings. It's so rich, that I think there's a lot there for repeat reads.
Yeah.
Well, because, Jess, I was really inspired by the fact that you said that the people were at the center for you. Let's talk about some of these people. Let's talk about Florida first. What did we love about her? I can just hear her skirt and the bells jingling.
We talked about this a little bit when we were discussing the Starless Sea. Was that just last month?
That was no, Such a Fun Age.
Oh, okay. I was like, it feels like a million years ago. But I love when a book is really grounded in the real world, that has just a tiny hint of the uncanny, or I wouldn't even go so far as to call it magical realism, because it's kind of open to interpretation what Florida's actual deal is, if she has experienced past lives, etc. This is just about like what she believes, but I like that little hint of the uncanny. So I loved Florida, and I also loved the tarot card reader who Jordan's girlfriend from New York sends Edward to when he's a teenager. I feel terrible. I can't remember the character's name. I'm so bad at character names.
There are a lot of names too.
Yeah, so. But the secret girlfriend.
Yes.
Yeah.
I love the interconnectedness of all of these people, and you realize that, the sort of inventor, the guy in first class that the mom is sitting next to.
Yeah.
The business owner.
I thought it was
startup
like a finance dude.
I think he was I don't know, he was rich, obviously.
Startup bro.
Based on his lifestyle, I just assumed he was a finance guy. And based on how much money he leaves his brother, who leaves it to Edward.
Yes, exactly. then we also have the soldier. I loved him too.
You know what I really loved about learning about everyone's background is because personally, I am that person that wherever I go, I'm always thinking about like what everyone is doing and like why they're going, where they're going, whether it was like on the subway or if I'm in a car, I'll like look to the person near me and be like, who are you? Like, why are you here?
Yeah,
And
do you ever
so
like just think like I'm thinking in my head and
yeah.
they're thinking in their heads and they're thinking something totally different and everyone here
Yes.
is like living a rich inner life.
Yes, it's amazing. I'm always like, what are you thinking about? And they could be like judging you. They could be thinking about like, I don't know, a breakup. Like who knows what they're going through. And so I loved that she like dove into that and told you what these people are up to. And so as a person who's always curious and thinking about that, that was probably my favorite part of the book.
I especially liked that they were all looking around and thinking about each other,
Yes, I
and they all
love
had very
that.
different interpretations of each other.
Yes, like first like impressions and judgments. It was great. I loved it.
But so when you are with people like on a flight, let's say, do you normally interact with them? Like some of these people chatting to each other on a flight, I'm like, what are you doing?
I
So
don't think
Never.
this will be a surprise to anyone that that is a very hard no from me.
and I don't think this will be a surprise to anyone. That's a yes for me. I always have people, even if I don't initiate it, most of the time I don't, but people always talk to me. I think it's my face. Something
You have a
about me.
friendly face.
So I have made a few friends in flight, and so I know how it feels to be both the person trying to initiate conversation and also the person being like, please stop talking.
When I'm on an airplane, I am trying to read 3 books, drink a ginger ale, and watch an entire season of the Black Lady sketch show and not talk to anyone.
Priorities. Priorities. So do you do you think that this book will influence you in the future about the way that you respond to emotional stories in the news? Like, do you think we have, as a humanity, a responsibility to remember the people affected by tragedy, and continue to sort of remember them long after they've disappeared from the headlines?
That's heavy.
It is heavy. I think that sometimes it's easy to disconnect yourself from people mentioned in the news. But I think it's always important to remember that they are people and they had a life and they had a family and friends and it's like a ripple effect, like their loss impacts everyone around them, so it might not mean anything to you and it might not affect you personally, but I think it's important to always keep that sense of humanity and remember that everyone has a story.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to talk a little bit about self-care.
I saw this in the book club kit and I'm very, very into it.
Yes, me too.
Especially
Wait,
because, oh,
what
did you
is
not
it?
see this, Jess?
No.
We'll read.
We'll share this on Read It Forward, but
I think it's just, oh, sorry, I'm bad about my microphone. It dovetails so well with both the content of this book and like what we're experiencing as a world right now and like the need to kind of ground ourselves in small everyday pleasures when something horrible is happening.
Yeah.
I was so excited when I saw this part in the book club guide this morning.
me too. So the calm and ritualistic nature of caring for plants helps Edward heal. And so they provide some 3 tips for caring for a kangaroo fern. But
He does faithfully for his principal for several years and even takes it home and takes care of it. And then he gets to keep it because that's where it lives now.
I know. And I myself am a plant mom, and I love taking care of plants. There's something I have in my window right now. There's an amaryllis that's about to bloom, and I can't even tell you like how much joy it's bringing me while we're stuck in our homes. Like it's so great, I think, to bring the outdoors in and to be able to care for something and see it perk up with water and when you prune it, it just feels better. So, I think it's akin to a pet, but I'm not really an animal person, so I loved that that in this book it's a fern.
I was just gonna say, I have only tried to take care of one spider plant in my life, and it died. But I am an animal person. So as you were saying that, my first thought was my 2 little dogs. And in this time, like just taking care of them has been so therapeutic, like feeding them and walking them and knowing that they're just so in their own bubble and they have no idea what's going on and they're just so happy that I'm here. And so like that's really what's been getting me through this.
So another tip in terms of self-care is friendship. That Edward relies on friendship to ease the burden of his sadness and his trauma. So are you finding yourselves in this time leaning on friends? Are you FaceTiming friends right now? Are you staying connected with people?
I think I'm like actively seeking it out in a way that I never have before, which makes total sense because, we're not doing our normal everyday routines. So in a normal week, even though the three of us, even though I sit on a different floor from you guys at the office, I see you at least once a day. And if I haven't seen you all day, I'll come upstairs and say hi. So, and I've just been like making an effort to touch base with at least one friend, whether by text or by phone or video chat or whatever, every day. Because, I mean, right now, even though we're social distancing, our connections are, what we have and what keep us human and sane. So yeah, I've definitely been leaning on friendship a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've always known that I'm like a person who lives and thrives on human interaction. And so this has been, as I'm sure, like same for, you guys, especially you, Abby, it's been pretty hard. So I've been relying way more on my friends actually. And we've kind of built this like stronger connection almost like we talk nonstop and we'll FaceTime and we'll Netflix party because that's a thing now. And I find that if I didn't have that, I don't know what I'd do. So.
Yeah, I definitely find myself having virtual happy hours with people and texting more. And a friend of mine just had a brand new baby right before this all happened. And so, I haven't met the baby yet, but Chloe, she's great at Zoom. So I know Zoom babies are so great.
Before we move on to the last, I just want to talk a little bit about friendship in terms of the book, specifically the relationship between Edward and Shay.
Yeah, such an amazing friendship.
I particularly loved that we got to see it develop for so many years. And one part that really stood out for me, let me make sure I can get the timeline right. It was when Edward basically, because of his PTSD, was having trouble in gym class and he shoved one of their classmates, and Shay kind of tried to step in and he told her to back off. And so then you get a couple of chapters where Edward is 100% sure that their friendship is irrevocably changed, and he can feel her pulling away, and he knows soon she's going to be done with him, and he doesn't know, how he's going to continue on after that connection is severed.
Mm-hmm.
Come to find out, weeks or maybe even months later, that's not what's happening at all. And Shay says to him, like, I'm going to come help you with these letters, but also you have to stop being so weird. Like, why are you ruining our friendship? And he has this light bulb moment of like, oh, this thing that I was absolutely sure was a total fact and inevitable and something I couldn't change was actually me being weird and projecting it, which I think maybe not to that same extent, but everyone can relate to a little bit, like having tension or perceived tension with a friend and then realizing like, oh no, it's like totally made up and not happening and everything's fine.
Totally. Or those moments where you're like, this is a huge deal. I will never get over this. And the other person literally does not remember. I have so many of those from middle school or something that I'll say to a friend now, like, remember when I did this? And they're like, no.
No.
And I loved the blossoming of their friendship. I always loved like how friendships begin. And so the minute they came to the door, like her and her mom, and she just like brought up that memory of Jordan, Edward's brother, I was like, oh, that's it. They're going to be friends.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a nice image too. It's so indicative of his character, I think.
Yep.
I also
and I
really
feel like that's what allowed
Shay
and Edward immediately to bond, is because almost she has a piece of his past life in that memory.
Yeah. And he's always looking for little pieces of Jordan, whether it's wearing his clothes or deciding to become a vegan. Or, oh gosh, why can't I remember the girlfriend's name? Going to visit the girlfriend in New York.
Yeah.
So I really liked that. And I also liked how he used his connection with Jordan to connect with his aunt.
Mm-hmm.
Because he realizes that like he lost his brother, and in losing his mom, Lacey lost her sister. So in some ways they have a similar experience.
Yeah.
So I want to just touch on the letter writing. How have you ever written a letter to someone to channel your grief or emotion, even if you didn't send it? I have done that, but I will say not to someone I didn't know, like Edward receiving all of these letters.
I don't do a lot of like theoretical writing. Perhaps I should do more of it. But I do cherish letter writing as a practice. I think, growing up, we would go visit my grandparents in Maine in the summer, and there's no electricity, no phone lines, no TV, nothing to do except read and hike around the island, etc. And I would write postcards to my friends, even though I was only gone for 2 weeks, and I always really loved that. I feel like letter writing is in danger of becoming a lost art. But in terms of like how people were writing to Edward in the book, I honestly think it's a huge transgression to write to a 12-year-old and put your problems on him. I think it was beautifully executed in the book, and I loved learning about all those people, and I thought it was cool that he was able to use it as a way to heal. Mm-hmm. But I definitely would be on his aunt and uncle's side if something like that happened in real life, and hide the letters, because that's just so much for a child to carry.
Yeah. And I think that absolutely would happen in real life. Like, I feel like people are like that, and they will try to reach out to whomever for whatever reason. I am a letter writer, by the way. I do write letters. I used to do it as a kid with my siblings. Like whenever we would get mad at each other or something, like they would slide letters under my door and we would communicate that way until we like made up with each other.
That's a good conflict resolution technique.
Yeah, it's like mailing, but it's under the door. And I do write letters to like my best friends and such, but I do agree with Emma that I would never send a letter like the ones in the book.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was totally fair of John and Lacey to keep these letters from him until he was old enough to process, right? Like, but I don't, how do you determine when someone's able to bear that emotional weight? I don't know.
I mean, I think because he found the letters on his own, they never had to really define when that was, because, I mean, there is no good time.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I wonder if he hadn't found them, when they would have given them to him.
Or if they would always find a reason to kind of kick the can, down the road.
Right.
So how do we want to talk about the ending? Do we think it's too spoilery?
I would love to get your thoughts.
I don't really think it's too spoilery. As previously discussed, I don't want to dive too deep into the actual plane crash itself. I wonder if you two thought that reading about how the crash was really just based on kind of a psychological fluke and that it was preventable human error, did that color your feeling about the events of the book at all?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it made it so much more tragic. To know that the crash was due to a preventable human error, I think was so devastating to learn, right? Instead of a mechanical malfunction that no one could have seen coming. And we learn this at the end of the book when we know these characters so well and we've seen what they've had to go through and we've seen the lives that have been cut short. It just, that was hard for me.
Yeah, totally. The fact that it was like a preventable thing just made me really sad.
Mm-hmm. So the one part about the end of the book that I do want to spoil, so if you haven't finished, everybody close your ears, is I really like how the transition of Edward and Shay's relationship from a friendship to a romantic relationship was executed. I think in reading the book, it seemed inevitable because their connection was so strong, but also I had no desire to read a book that was about their romantic relationship, if that makes sense.
Right.
Yeah. And I thought it was just like so clean and elegant that it's just like one line that looks to the future and like one sentence. So like so much of what unfolds for them without it felt very like economical in terms of the language, and I thought that was just very nicely done right at the end.
Yeah,
I agree. I mean, oftentimes I love stories about male-female friendship that doesn't stray into romance, because we've talked, I think, in different books about how it really is possible to have male and female friends that you don't all of a sudden fall in love with. But I think the gravity of what Edward has been through and the closeness that he feels to Shay, you almost love them for taking it to that next level. And for Edward, like, finally some great happiness comes to him in his life.
Yeah. I thought it was a very nice, neat ending without being like too tied in a bow perfect.
Totally.
Yeah.
Well, I think we did it, guys.
We did it.
A remote book club. It's so good to see you guys' faces.
You too.
Same.
And
I just want to, can
yeah.
I say something to our readers? I just want to say that I hope that Read It Forward Book Club is a place for you to come together during this time. And I hope that you're all staying safe and finding love in books, and we're here.
We love you. Wash your hands.
Yes.
All right. Thanks, guys. Thanks for being here. Thanks, readers, for listening. And yeah, let us know your thoughts on the book. Let us know if you're having trouble concentrating on a book or if all you can do is read. Tell us what you're reading. Just help us be distracted from the headlines out there, because we need you guys more than ever. So with that, we will sign off, and maybe, who knows, maybe we'll come to you next month from our homes. Who knows? But we're here, and we are glad you guys are too.
Bye.
Bye.